The day my mother kicked me out on Christmas, calling me a burden, was the day I stopped being a child. I never imagined that 10 years later, a letter from my deceased grandfather would change everything, giving me not just his fortune, but something far more valuable: justice. My name is Rachel Winters. I'm 32 now, with a psychology degree and a private practice specializing in trauma recovery. Ironic, I know. But understanding trauma was never just academic for me, it was survival. I still remember the chill that ran through my body that Christmas morning. Not from the December air, but from my mother's words. "You're nothing but a burden, Rachel. Always have been." Her voice was flat, emotionless, the same tone she might use to comment on the weather or what we needed from the grocery store. My stepfather stood behind her, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. The Christmas tree lights blinked silently in the background, casting colorful shadows across the living room. I would never call home again. I was 15 years old. I had committed the unforgivable crime of asking about my college fund, the one my real dad had started for me before he died when I was 8. The fund that had mysteriously vanished, along with any trace of love in that house after my mother remarried Frank 3 years later. "There is no college fund anymore," she'd said, not looking up from her magazine. "We needed it for the renovation." The renovation was Frank's idea, a massive entertainment room with a built-in bar and theater system. My future traded for his man cave. When I protested, when I cried and reminded her that Dad had wanted that money for my education, she snapped. That's when the burden bomb dropped, and the eviction notice that followed. "Pack what you can carry. I want you out by tonight," Frank added helpfully. "Your little attitude problem is ruining our Christmas. Your mother deserves better. My mother deserves better." As if I wasn't her flesh and blood. As if the woman who once sang me lullabies hadn't been replaced by this cold-eyed stranger who couldn't bear to look at me. I remember packing with mechanical precision: clothes, toiletries, my Dad's watch, photos, the journal he'd given me before cancer took him. I worked silently while downstairs they called my grandfather my dad's father, and spun some tale about me being out of control and impossible to handle. Grandpa James lived 3 hours away in a small farmhouse he'd owned since returning from Vietnam. He is my dad's hero, and mine too, a quiet, dignified man who'd seen the worst of humanity but somehow maintained his gentle nature. He didn't hesitate when he heard I needed somewhere to go. "I'm coming to get her," was all he said. Those 3 hours were the longest of my life. My mother didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me as I sat on the front steps with my backpack and one small suitcase waiting in the cold. Christmas morning. Neighbors walking past with forced smiles, pretending not to notice the teenage girl being discarded like yesterday's trash. When Grandpa's old blue pickup finally pulled into the driveway, I felt the first breath enter my lungs in hours. He didn't say much, just hugged me tight, loaded my things, and gave my mother a look that could have frozen hell itself. "She's his daughter, Margaret," was all he said to her. The his needed no explanation. We all knew he meant my father, his son. The implication was clear. How could you do this to David's child? My mother flinched, but her expression hardened again almost immediately. "She's impossible, James, just like him. Always questioning everything, always thinking she knows better." Grandpa just shook his head. Helped me into the truck, and we drove away. I didn't cry until we hit the highway, and even then the tears came silently. Grandpa reached over and squeezed my hand. "Your dad would be real proud of how you're handling this. Rach. Real proud." Living with Grandpa James was like finding an oasis after wandering in the desert. His farmhouse wasn't fancy, just a simple 2-bedroom place with creaking floors and windows that whistled when the wind blew hard. But it was peaceful, respectful. For the first time in years, I could breathe. He never pushed me to talk about what happened, but he listened when I needed to. He helped me enroll in the local high school, drove me to and from each day, and made sure I had everything I needed. Not just the basics, but books, art supplies, a desk for studying. He valued education almost as much as my dad had. "The mind's a weapon, Rachel," he'd say in his gravelly voice. "And nobody can ever take it from you." In the evenings, we'd sit on his porch swing and he'd tell me stories about my dad as a boy, about his time in the service, about the world and how it worked. Sometimes he'd talk about my grandmother, who'd passed before I was born. The way his voice softened when he mentioned her taught me more about love than any romance novel ever could. My mother called exactly once, 2 weeks after Christmas. Not to check if I was okay, but to inform me that she was shipping the rest of my junk and to make sure I knew I wasn't welcome back. Grandpa took the phone from my trembling hand. "Margaret," he said evenly, "what you've done isn't just wrong. It's unforgivable." Then he hung up and pulled me into a bear hug that smelled of pipe tobacco and Old Spice. "Family doesn't quit on family," he whispered. I finished high school at the top of my class. When college acceptance letters came, Grandpa insisted on celebrating each one, even though we both knew I couldn't afford most of them. What we didn't know then was that my dad had set up a separate trust with Grandpa as executor, one my mother couldn't touch. It wasn't enough for an Ivy League education, but combined with scholarships and part-time work, it got me through state university. I chose psychology because I needed to understand not just what had happened to my family, but why people hurt the ones they're supposed to love. How a mother could discard her child. How loss could twist someone so completely. Grandpa came to every parent weekend, every significant event. He sat front row at my graduation, wearing his best suit and a smile that could light up the stadium. That night, over dinner, he said something I'll never forget. "Your father used to say you had eyes that could see through walls." Now I know what he meant. You see people, Rachel, the real them, not just what they show the world. I was 2 years into my master's program when Grandpa's health began to fail. The doctors called it congestive heart failure, but I think part of it was just time catching up. He'd lived hard, war, then factory work, then losing his only son. The body keeps the score, as we say in psychology. I moved back to the farmhouse to care for him, commuting to classes when I could, taking some online. He fought me on it at first. "You've got your own life to live, Rachel. I won't be the thing that holds you back. You've never held me back, Grandpa. You're the only one who ever pushed me forward." His last 6 months were difficult but precious. We talked more deeply than ever before. About my father, about forgiveness, about what would happen after he was gone. "I've made arrangements," he'd say, patting my hand. "You won't have to worry." I thought he meant funeral arrangements. I had no idea what he really had planned. The day Grandpa died was calm and sunny, almost offensive in its peacefulness. He went quietly in his sleep, his hand still warm when I found him that morning. I sat with him for nearly an hour before calling anyone, just holding his hand and thanking him for saving me in every way a person can be saved. The funeral was small, just me, a few of Grandpa's old war buddies, neighbors, and some distant cousins I barely knew. My mother and Frank didn't come. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. After everything, she couldn't even pay respects to the man who'd raised her husband, who'd stepped in to parent the child she'd thrown away. What did surprise me was the call I got from her the day after the funeral. "Rachel? It's your mother." As if I wouldn't recognize the voice that had once called me a burden. "What do you want?" My tone was professional, detached, the voice I use with difficult clients. "I heard about James. I'm sorry for your loss." The pause told me everything. This wasn't about condolences. "Thank you. Is there something else?" She cleared her throat. "Well, yes. I was wondering about the arrangements. For the farmhouse and everything else, of course. Grandpa's property. In the 7 years since she'd kicked me out, she hadn't once asked how I was doing, if I needed anything, if I was even alive. But Grandpa's potential assets? That warranted a phone call. "There's a lawyer handling everything," I said simply. "If you're named in the will, I'm sure he'll contact you." "Well, I am family," she said, a defensive edge to her voice. "And Frank and I could use the extra space. We've been thinking about a vacation property." The audacity stole my breath. I'd just lost the only real parent I had left, and she was eyeing his home as a potential vacation spot. "I have to go," I said and hung up. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week. I expected it to be straightforward. The farmhouse and whatever modest savings Grandpa had would come to me, his only real family left. What I didn't expect was Mark Harrington, Grandpa's lawyer of 40 years, to tell me that the will execution would be delayed. Delayed? "Why?" I asked, sitting in his wood-paneled office that smelled of leather and old books. Harrington, a thin man with spectacles and careful hands, slid an envelope across his desk. Your grandfather was very specific about the timing, he explained. This is for you, to be delivered now. The rest comes later. The envelope was heavy cream stationery, sealed with actual wax like something from another century. Written on the front in Grandpa's distinctive block lettering, for Rachel to be opened alone. I took it home to the farmhouse, which felt both comforting and hollow without him, and sat on the porch swing to read it. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. I hope it involves fishing. First, know that watching you grow into the strong, compassionate woman you've become has been the greatest privilege of my life. Your father would burst with pride if he could see you now. I certainly do. There are things I never told you, not because I wanted secrets between us, but because some truths need the right time. This is that time. When your father died, he left specific instructions about your future. He knew your mother better than she knew herself, and he feared what might happen if he wasn't there to protect you. Especially if she remarried, which she did faster than even he anticipated. The college fund your mother claimed to have spent was never in her control. That was a decoy, a small account we allowed her to know about. The real trust has been growing safely out of her reach all these years. But there's more, much more. In my bedroom behind the painting of the lighthouse, your grandmother's favorite, there's a small safe. Inside is everything you need to know and a key to a larger safe deposit box at First National. The combination is your birthday, month, day, year, all is 2 digits. What you do with what you find is entirely up to you. You owe nothing to those who abandoned you. Remember that. I've arranged for this letter to reach you now, but for the will to be executed exactly 10 years from the day your mother cast you out. December 25th. There's a reason for that which will become clear. Don't contact your mother before then. In fact, it's best if she believes you've inherited very little. Mer Harrington understands and will help maintain this impression. I love you, granddaughter. You were never, not for 1 second, a burden. You were a gift. Always, Grandpa James P.S. The property tax on the farmhouse is paid up for the next 2 years. Stay as long as you need, or sell it if you wish. It's yours with no strings attached. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking more with each pass. Then I went straight to Grandpa's bedroom, removed the lighthouse painting, and found the wall safe I'd never known existed. The combination worked on the first try. Inside was another envelope, a small key taped to the front, and a leather-bound journal that I recognized as my father's. I started with the new envelope. Rachel, the key opens box 447 at First National. Go alone. What you find there is the result of 10 years of careful planning by your father and, after his passing, by me. Your mother's treatment of you revealed her true character. What you're about to discover will reveal much more. Be careful. Be smart. Be worthy of your father's name. Grandpa, I drove to the bank the next morning when it opened. The manager recognized me. Small towns have long memories, and led me to the safe deposit room without questions. Box 447 was larger than I expected. Inside were several folders, a USB drive, and a small wooden box with my name carved into the lid. I started with the folders. The first contained legal documents, my father's original will, a second will that appeared to have been drafted just weeks before his death, and a letter from an investigator dated 6 years after he died. The second folder held financial records, accounts I'd never known about, properties, investments, all in my father's name, with Grandpa as trustee until I turned 25. The third folder was the most disturbing. It contained surveillance photos of my mother and Frank, taken years before my father died. They were together, having an affair. While my father was undergoing cancer treatment, there were bank statements showing large withdrawals from my parents' joint accounts, all made by my mother in the year before my father died. And, most damning, a recording on the USB drive. I played it on my laptop right there in the bank's private room. It was my mother's voice and Frank's, discussing my father's life insurance, planning their future together, waiting for him to die. The wooden box contained my father's wedding ring, a watch I'd never seen before, and a letter addressed to me in his handwriting. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then 2 things have happened. I've lost my battle with this disease, and your mother has shown her true colors. I suspected her affair long before my diagnoses, but confirmation came later. The man she chose is not worthy of her, and certainly not worthy of being any kind of father to you. I've stayed for you, fought to live for you, but I know my time is limited. What I've arranged with Dad, your Grandpa James, is insurance. Not just financial, but emotional. You will never be without resources or family who truly love you. If your mother has been the woman I once believed her to be, then Grandpa will have kept these contingencies private. But if she has chosen greed and selfishness over caring for you, then you now hold in your hands the means to secure your future. The accounts, the properties, they're all yours. A trust that activates on your 25th birthday. Or earlier, if circumstances required you to need immediate support, which, if you're reading this, they did. I don't ask that you forgive her. I only ask that you live well. That's the best revenge. I love you beyond words, beyond time. Dad, I sat in that sterile bank room for what felt like hours. The evidence of my father's foresight and my mother's betrayal spread before me. The truth was both devastating and liberating. My father had known. He'd prepared. He'd protected me from beyond the grave. What I didn't understand yet was Grandpa's timing. Why wait 10 years from the day she kicked me out? What significance did that hold? The answer came in the final document in the box, a detailed accounting of my mother's financial activities since my father's death. She and Frank had spent almost everything they had, the life insurance, the sale of our family home, even loans taken against Frank as pension. According to Grandpa's notes, they were underwater, mortgaged beyond what their house was worth, credit cards maxed out, and facing a significant tax bill for unreported income from rental properties they'd acquired and mismanaged. And there, in the final pages, was Grandpa's masterstroke. He'd been quietly buying up their debt for years through a shell company. Mortgage, credit cards, tax liens. All of it now effectively owned by my father's estate, which was now mine. I could foreclose. I could call in every debt. I could, with the stroke of a pen, make them as homeless as they once made me. The 10-year mark, Christmas Day, wasn't random. It was precisely when the balloon payment on their refinanced mortgage would come due, a payment they couldn't possibly make. As I drove back to the farmhouse, my mind raced with possibilities. Power I never asked for but now possessed. The psychological training in me understood the cycle that had brought us here, my mother's betrayal of my father. Her guilt manifesting as resentment toward me, the constant reminder of the man she'd wronged. Frank's jealousy of the love between father and daughter, the money that had motivated it all. I spent the next week in a daze, reviewing documents, consulting privately with Mr. Harrington, and coming to terms with my new reality. I was wealthy, not just comfortable, but genuinely wealthy. My father had been far more successful than I'd ever known, and his investments had grown substantially under Grandpa's careful management. I was also now in a position of extraordinary leverage over the woman who had called me a burden and thrown me away. The question wasn't whether I could exact revenge. The question was what kind of person I wanted to be while doing it. I was still contemplating this when my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Rachel? It's your mother. Her voice sounded different, strained, desperate. What do you want? The same response as before, but this time there was power behind it. I've been trying to reach you. About James's property. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. We're ... Frank and I are in a bit of a situation, financially. We were hoping. Well, James always had a soft spot for family. I thought maybe he left something that could help us out of this jam. The audacity was breathtaking. What kind of jam? I asked, knowing full well the answer. She hesitated. Just some investments that didn't pan out. Nothing serious. But the bank is being difficult about our mortgage. That sounds stressful, I said neutrally. Especially around the holidays. Yes. Yes, it is, she paused. So did he leave anything that could help? The will hasn't been fully executed yet, I said, which was technically true. There are some delays. Delays? What kind of delays? When will it be settled? December 25th, I said. The lawyer was very specific about that date. The sharp intake of breath told me she recognized the significance immediately. That's ... That's not good. We need help before then. The bank is threatening foreclosure if we don't make a payment by the 20th. That's terrible, I said, my voice calm. Being forced out of your home during the holidays. I can't imagine how that must feel. The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. She knew exactly what I was saying. Rachel, I know things weren't always good between us. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I repeated. Is that what you call throwing your 15-year-old daughter out on Christmas Day? A mistake? I was in a bad place then. Frank and I were struggling. Stop! My voice was steel. Don't rewrite history. You chose him over me. You called me a burden. You gave away my college fund. Or so you thought. What do you mean, thought? Her voice sharpened. Nothing. It doesn't matter now. It does if it affects us. Rachel, please. We're about to lose everything. I closed my eyes, centered myself. I have to go. I'll be in touch after the will is settled, but that will be too late. Rachel, please, we're your family. No, I cut her off. You stopped being my family the moment you kicked me out. Grandpa was my family. Dad was my family. You're just someone I used to know. I hung up, my heart pounding but my mind clear. For the first time since Grandpa died, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Mr. Harrington helped me set everything in motion. We worked quietly, methodically, the same way Grandpa and my father had planned all those years ago. By December 20th, everything was in place. On December 21st, my mother called again. Her voice was frantic. The bank foreclosed. They're giving us until New Year's to vacate. Rachel, we have nowhere to go. That's terrible, I said again. Truly terrible. Did the will get settled? Please, we need help. Not until the 25th. That's the date Grandpa specified. Can't you talk to the lawyer? Make him understand it's an emergency? He's following my grandfather's explicit instructions. His hands are tied. She was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, can we come stay with you? Just until we figure something out? The request was so outrageous I almost laughed. No, Mother. You can't. But where are we supposed to go? It's Christmas. Yes, I said. It is Christmas. Funny how things come full circle, isn't it? I could almost hear the realization dawning on her. You know something. About our mortgage. About all of this. Single quotes, I know many things. We'll talk on the 25th. What happens on the 25th? Her voice was wary now. Justice, I said simply. Justice happens on the 25th. The next few days were quiet. I prepared the farmhouse for visitors, not my mother and Frank, but Murray, Harrington and his assistant. Who would bring the final paperwork on Christmas Day? I thought about my father, about Grandpa, about the careful plan they'd constructed to protect me, not just financially but emotionally. They'd ensured I would never have to beg for what was rightfully mine. They'd given me power when I was at my most powerless. On Christmas morning, exactly 10 years after my mother had cast me out, I sat on Grandpa's porch swing with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise. There was peace in my heart, but also resolve. The scared 15-year-old girl was gone. In her place was a woman who understood both justice and mercy. My phone rang at precisely 9 a.m. Merry Christmas, Mother, I answered. Rachel, her voice was thick with tears. We're being evicted, today, on Christmas. Please tell me the will has been executed. It has, I said calmly. I'm meeting with Harrington at 10. Where are you? At a motel off Highway 40. It's all we could afford. Text me the address. I'll come by after my meeting. You will? Really? Hope crept into her voice. Yes, we have a lot to discuss. I hung up and finished my coffee, watching as Harrington's car pulled up the long driveway to the farmhouse. In his briefcase were the final documents, the ones that would determine not just my future but my mother's as well. It was time to decide what kind of justice this Christmas would bring. Mr. Harrington arrived precisely at 10 a.m., his silver-rimmed glasses catching the winter sunlight as he made his way up the porch steps. He carried his worn leather briefcase with the same careful dignity he brought to all our meetings. Merry Christmas, Rachel, he said, his voice gentle. Are you certain you want to proceed today? There would be a certain poetic justice in delaying. I shook my head. My grandfather and father arranged for today. I won't dishonor their planning. He nodded, understanding. Very well. We settled in Grandpa's study, the room still filled with his presence in the worn leather chair, the bookshelf of military history, and the faint smell of pipe tobacco that lingered months after his passing. Harrington spread the documents across the oak desk. As we discussed, here are the final transfer documents for all assets. he began, his finger tracing along the signature lines. Once you sign, everything will be officially yours. The trust funds, the properties, the investment portfolios, and, of course, all the debt instruments. The debt instruments, such a clean, clinical term for what they really represented, the noose my mother and Frank had unknowingly placed around their own necks. And these are the foreclosure papers? I asked, indicating a separate folder. Yes, the shell corporation your grandfather established has legal right to foreclose on their property. The timing, ... Well, that was your grandfather's particular touch. The due date falling exactly 10 years after ... single quotes. He trailed off, tactful, as always. After she threw me away like garbage, I finished for him. It's all right to say it, Mr. Harrington. I've made peace with what happened. He nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. Your grandfather wanted them to feel what you felt. The same date. The same sense of having nowhere to go. He believed in balance. Yes, he did. I picked up the pen he'd laid on the desk, a heavy fountain pen that had been my father's. Another piece of my heritage returned to me. Let's proceed. One by one, I signed the documents. With each signature, I felt a shift inside me. Not triumph or glee, but something quieter. Resolution, perhaps. The final fulfillment of my father's and grandfather's intentions. When we finished, Mr. Harrington gathered the papers and returned them to his briefcase, save for one folder which he left on the desk. These are yours to keep. Copies of everything, plus the key information you'll need going forward. He paused. What will you do now? About your mother and her husband? I ran my fingers over the folder. I'm meeting them in an hour. And have you decided? His question was gentle, without judgment. Yes, I said quietly. I've decided. After Mr. Harrington left, I stood in front of the hallway mirror, studying my reflection. I looked like my father around the eyes, the same deep brown that Grandpa always said could see through walls. My mother's chin, though, determined, slightly pointed. I wondered if she would see herself in me today, if she would recognize what she had thrown away. I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to armor myself. Dark jeans, a gray cashmere sweater Grandpa had given me for my last birthday. My father's watch on my wrist, professional, contained. I swept my hair into a simple ponytail and applied minimal makeup. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was business. The motel my mother had texted me was exactly what I'd expected. A roadside establishment with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights in the office. Room 17 was at the far end, partially obscured by a rusting ice machine. I parked my sensible Subaru beside Frank's once flashy BMW, now showing its age with dense and fading paint. 3 knocks, and the door opened. My mother had aged. That was my first thought. How the past 10 years had carved lines around her eyes and mouth that makeup couldn't disguise. Her blonde hair, once her pride, was dull and carelessly styled. She wore what I recognized as her good outfit, a navy skirt suit that had been fashionable perhaps 5 years ago. Rachel. Her voice broke on my name. She moved as if to hug me, but I stepped past her into the room. Frank sat on the edge of one of the twin beds, his once imposing frame somehow diminished. He'd lost hair, gained weight, and the arrogance I remembered had been replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fear. He nodded at me, but didn't speak. The room itself told its own story. Designer suitcases that had seen better days, piled with clothes in disarray. A bottle of cheap whiskey on the nightstand, half empty. The desperation of people who had been living beyond their means for too long, now suddenly facing the consequences. Thank you for coming, my mother said, closing the door behind me. Did you meet with the lawyer? Always direct to what she wanted. Some things never changed. I did. I remained standing, declining her gesture toward the room's single chair. And Frank spoke finally, his voice rough. Did the old man leave anything that can help us? My mother shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. The old man, I repeated, ice in my voice, was the only real father I had after my dad died. He took me in when you threw me out. He made sure I had a home, an education, and a future. So yes, Frank, he left me quite a lot. My mother rushed to smooth things over. We're just in a very difficult position, Rachel. The bank, it's not the bank. I cut her off. Not anymore, they both stared at me. What do you mean? My mother asked slowly. I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the wobbly table between the beds. Your mortgage, your credit card debt, your tax liens. They're not held by banks or credit card companies anymore. They've been purchased by an investment group. Frank stood up, suddenly alert. What investment group? One that my grandfather established with my father's money. The money my father set aside before he died, before you began your affair, Mother, before you drained every account you could access. The color drained from my mother's face. What are you talking about? Dad knew about the affair, about the money you were siphoning. He knew everything. Frank looked at my mother, his expression unreadable. That's ridiculous, she stammered. Your father was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was thinking more clearly than you could possibly imagine, I said, opening the folder. Clear enough to create a secret trust for me that you couldn't touch. Clear enough to document your affair with photographic evidence. Clear enough to record your conversations about how you were planning to spend his life insurance money before he was even dead. I laid out the surveillance photos on the bed. My mother with Frank, dated 3 months before my father's diagnosis. Bank statements showing withdrawals that coincided with dates they were seen together at a hotel outside town. It was all there, meticulously documented. My mother sank onto the bed, her legs seemingly unable to support her. Frank remained standing, his face flushing dark red. This is some kind of sick joke, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No joke, I replied. Just facts. Facts that my grandfather continued to gather long after my father died. He tracked every financial decision you made, every mistake, every new debt. And one by one he bought them all. Why? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Why would he do that? At first to protect me, to make sure I would have what Dad intended for me. But after you kicked me out? I met her eyes directly. It became something else. A reckoning. So what now? Frank demanded, fear making him aggressive. You own our debts, so what? You're going to make us homeless? On Christmas? That's your grand revenge? The irony was so thick I almost smiled. Feeling a bit of déjà vu, Frank? Being forced out of your home on Christmas Day? Being called a burden? He had the decency to look away. The foreclosure is already in process, I continued. The eviction notice you received is completely legal. By midnight tonight, you need to be out of your house. Where are we supposed to go? My mother cried. We have nothing. No savings, no family who'll take us in. I know exactly how that feels, I said quietly. I was 15 when I experienced it. At least you're adults. At least you've had years of comfort bought with my father's money. The room fell silent except for my mother's muffled sobs. Frank stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in defeat. However, I said after a long moment, I've made a decision about how to proceed. They both looked at me, hope and fear mingling in their expressions. I pulled out another document from my bag. This is a rental agreement. I've purchased a small condo in Westfield, about an hour from here. 2 bedrooms, basic amenities. Nothing luxurious, but clean and functional. The rent is set at a level you can afford if Frank takes that assistant manager position at the hardware store he was offered last month. Frank's eyes widened in surprise. Of course, Grandpa had kept tabs on their job prospects too. You're ... offering us a place to live? My mother asked, confusion evident in her voice. I'm offering you a chance to start over. Honestly, modestly. The way I had to, I placed the rental agreement on the table. You'll have exactly what you need, nothing more. You'll learn to live within your means. Why would you do this? Frank asked suspiciously. After everything? I turned to look at him directly. Not for you, never for you, but because I refuse to become what you are. I won't let your cruelty turn me cruel. I looked back at my mother. There are conditions, non-negotiable ones. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. What conditions? First, you will never ask me for money. Not a cent beyond what this arrangement provides. Second, you will both seek counseling. I've already arranged for sessions with a colleague of mine who specializes in financial infidelity and relationship issues. I paused. And third, Mother, you will write me a letter. A letter? She repeated. A full accounting of everything. Why you had the affair. What you were thinking when you kicked me out. Every justification, every rationalization, I want it all on paper. Not for reconciliation, I'm not offering that, but for closure. Mine, not yours. My mother nodded slowly. fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "One more thing," I added, pulling out my phone and setting it on the table. "I want you to repeat what you said to me 10 years ago. Word for word, Rachel, please, ... single quotes," she whispered. "Say it. Say what you called me." She closed her eyes, her voice barely audible. "I said you were ... a burden. That you'd always been a burden." I pressed stop on the recording app. Now I have that too. A reminder in case I ever weaken and forget why things are the way they are between us. I stood to leave, placing a set of keys next to the rental agreement. "The condo is furnished, you can move in today. The address is on the paperwork. I've paid the security deposit and first month's rent. After that, it's on you." My mother looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and bewildered. "I don't understand. You could take everything from us, make us suffer, why aren't you?" I paused at the door, considering her question. "Because Dad and Grandpa didn't raise me to destroy people. They raised me to stand on my own 2 feet with dignity. They wanted me to have options they never thought you would give me." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm not showing you mercy, Mother. I'm showing myself respect." As I walked back to my car, the winter sun was high in a clear blue sky. My phone rang. Eli, my boyfriend of 2 years, checking in. "How did it go?" he asked. Eli knew everything, had supported my decision regardless of which way I chose to go. "It's done," I said simply. "They'll take the condo. Are you okay?" I considered the question as I slid behind the wheel. "Yes, better than okay. I feel ... free." "Come home," he said gently. "I've got Christmas dinner almost ready, and Diane and Marcus are bringing dessert." Home. Not the farmhouse where I'd been staying since Grandpa died, but the house Eli and I had bought together near my practice. The life I'd built while my mother and Frank had been dismantling theirs. "I'll be there soon," I promised. Just one more stop to make. That stop was the cemetery. I parked near the familiar path and made my way through the silent rows, past the Christmas wreaths and poinsettias left by other visitors, until I reached the 2 graves side by side, my father and Grandpa. I stood before their headstones, the cold air filling my lungs. "It's done," I said quietly. "Not exactly as you planned, perhaps. But in a way I think you'd both understand. The revenge they'd architected had been perfect, meticulous, complete, devastating. But it wasn't what I needed. I'd chosen something else, something that freed me from being defined by what my mother had done, without releasing her from the consequences of her actions. I placed a small stone on each of their headstones, a tradition Grandpa had taught me from his military buddies. A sign that I'd been there, that I remembered. "Thank you for the gift," I whispered. "Not the money. The choice." The next few months brought expected and unexpected developments. My mother and Frank moved into the condo and, to my mild surprise, Frank took the hardware store job. It was a significant step down from his previous position at the investment firm where he'd worked before his series of failed ventures, but he seemed to approach it with a strange kind of relief. The weight of pretending to be something he wasn't had apparently been heavier than anyone realized. My mother sent the letter I'd requested 6 weeks after our Christmas Day meeting. 12 pages, handwritten, tear-stained in places. I read it once, locked it in my home office drawer, and haven't looked at it since. "Some wounds need air to heal, but others need to be sealed away, examined only when you're ready." I wasn't ready yet. They attended the counseling sessions, at first reluctantly. Then with increasing engagement, according to my colleague Dr. Winters. She couldn't share details, of course, but she confirmed they were doing the work, making progress. I sold the farmhouse in March, not because I needed the money, but because it deserved a family who would fill its rooms with noise and life. Grandpa would have approved. I kept some of his things, his favorite chair, his books, the porch swing where we'd spent so many evenings. The rest I donated to veterans organizations he had supported. My practice thrived. Working with trauma survivors took on new meaning now that I'd fully processed my own. Eli and I set a wedding date for the following spring. My life moved forward in ways that felt authentic and earned. I had no contact with my mother or Frank beyond necessary communications through Amar Harrington about the rental arrangement. That boundary felt right, not punitive, just protective. Then, in early June, my office phone rang with a call from an unknown number. "Dr. Winters speaking," I answered, using my professional voice. "Rachel? It's Frank." I nearly hung up. We had procedures in place. They were supposed to contact Mr. Harrington with any issues regarding the condo. What do you want, Frank? My tone made it clear this was an unwelcome breach. It's your mother, he said, his voice strained. She's in the hospital. Valley Medical. She had a stroke yesterday. The information hit like cold water. Is she ... Will she recover? They think so. Mostly. There may be some left side weakness, speech issues. They're still assessing. I closed my eyes, centering myself. Why are you calling me? We have an arrangement. I know we do. He sounded exhausted. She didn't ask me to call. This isn't about money or the condo or anything like that. She's just ... She keeps asking for you. Not lucidly. She's pretty heavily medicated. But your name keeps coming up. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. You don't owe her anything, Frank continued, surprising me. God knows you don't. But I thought... I thought you should know at least. What room? I heard myself ask. 307. East Wing. Single quotes. He paused. Thank you for asking. I hung up without responding. For 3 days I went about my life, seeing clients, having dinner with Eli, calling vendors about wedding arrangements. I told no one about my mother's stroke. Not even Eli. It sat in my chest like a stone, neither growing nor diminishing. On the 4th day, I found myself driving to Valley Medical after my last appointment. I hadn't planned it, hadn't even consciously decided. But there I was, parking in the visitor's lot, walking through the automatic doors that hissed open to admit me. Room 307 was at the end of a long hallway that smelled of antiseptic and institutional food. The door was partially open, and I could see my mother's small form in the bed, her back to the door. A television mounted on the wall played what looked like a game show, the volume low. I stood watching her for nearly a minute. She seemed diminished somehow, the hospital gown too large for her shoulders. Her once meticulously styled hair was flat against the pillow. A bag of clear liquid dripped steadily into an ov in her arm. I almost turned away. Almost left. Then she shifted slightly, made a small sound of discomfort, and I found myself stepping into the room. Mother? She turned slowly, her movements careful, as if testing what her body would allow. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and her hand went to her throat. Rachel? Her voice was slurred, the right side of her mouth not quite keeping up with the left. You're here? I moved to the chair beside her bed, not taking her hand, but sitting where she could see me without straining. Frank called, I said simply. How are you feeling? Been better. She attempted a smile that didn't quite work. Doctors say ... lucky. Could be worse, I nodded, noting the chart hanging at the foot of her bed, the medications listed on the whiteboard on the wall. Professional curiosity, clinical distance. Where's Frank? I asked, realizing he wasn't there. Work, hardware store. She pronounced each syllable with careful effort. Good job, steady, he likes it. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. What does one say to the mother who abandoned you when she lies diminished in a hospital bed? I hadn't planned this visit, had no script prepared. Why did you come? She asked finally, her good hand plucking at the thin blanket covering her legs. I considered the question. I don't know, I answered truthfully. Maybe because no one should be alone in a hospital. Her eyes filled with tears. Alone. Yes, know that feeling. I felt a flicker of anger. Don't try to create false equivalence between us. She shook her head slowly. Not comparing. Just ... truth. Been alone. Even with Frank. Empty house. Empty life. She struggled with the longer sentences, frustration crossing her face. Deserve it. Know that. I looked away, focusing on the muted television where contestants spun a colorful wheel. The doctors say you'll recover? Mostly? Physical therapy, speech therapy, time. She took a breath. Insurance. Covers basics. I heard the unasked question beneath her statement. My professional background included knowledge of what stroke recovery required, and how expensive comprehensive rehabilitation could be. I'm not here about money, I said firmly. That hasn't changed. She nodded, her eyes closing briefly. Understand. Not asking, when she opened her eyes again they were clearer than before, just ... glad you came. Didn't expect. We sat in silence for several minutes. I noticed a small overnight bag in the corner, a tattered paperback on the bedside table. Evidence of Frank's visits. He was trying at least. Letter, my mother said suddenly. Did you read? Yes. I read it. Believe me. Any of it? I considered the question. Her letter had been full of explanations, her unhappiness in the marriage even before my father's illness. Her feeling of being trapped by his diagnosis, the way Frank had made her feel desired when she'd felt invisible. She'd written about her resentment when I'd grown to look more like my father, act more like him. How every time she looked at me, she saw her own guilt reflected back. I believe you believe it, I said finally. I believe it was your truth, as you experienced it. She nodded, accepting this limited validation. Fair. A nurse entered, checking monitors and adjusting the IV drip. Blood pressure's looking better today, Margaret, she said cheerfully. And you have a visitor? How nice, my daughter, my mother said, the words coming out clearly, perhaps from emotional force overriding the physical difficulty. The nurse smiled at me. She's doing remarkably well. Tough lady, your mom. I nodded, not correcting the assumption of a normal mother-daughter relationship. What would be the point? After the nurse left, my mother tried to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. Practice opening, anniversary, 5 years? 5 years? It took me a moment to understand she was asking about my psychology practice. How did you know that? A small, sad smile. Keep track. Always. She pointed weakly to her bedside table drawer. Open. I hesitated, then pulled the drawer open. Inside was a folder, worn at the edges from handling. I took it out, opened it to find newspaper clippings, printouts from the local business journal, articles about my practice opening, small feature when I'd won a community service award for pro bono work with veterans. My engagement announcement to Eli. You kept these? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Everyone. Proud. She struggled with the word, but it came out clearly. So proud. Never said. Should have. I closed the folder, uncertain how to feel. Was this a manipulation? A bid for sympathy? Or the genuine regret of a woman facing her mortality after a medical crisis? I should go, I said, standing. I have clients early tomorrow. She nodded, not attempting to make me stay. Thank you for coming. I hesitated at the door. Do you do you need anything? Books or something? No. She shook her head slightly. Frank brings. All set. I nodded and turned to leave. Rachel? Her voice stopped me. Happy for you. Good life. Deserve it. I didn't respond, just nodded once more and left, walking quickly down the antiseptic hallway toward the exit, toward the fresh air that suddenly seemed essential. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. The folder of clippings about my life sat on the passenger seat where I'd placed it, taking it without conscious decision. Evidence of FTS. A mother's pride that came far too late? I picked up my phone and called Eli. Hey, he answered, warmth in his voice. Heading home? Not yet, I said. I visited my mother in the hospital. She had a stroke. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. In all our time together, I'd never initiated contact with my mother. Had maintained the boundary I'd established that Christmas day. Are you okay? He asked finally, concern evident. I don't know, I answered honestly. She kept a folder of news clippings about me, about the practice, our engagement, everything. Do you want me to come? I can meet you there. I considered the offer. No, I'm coming home. I needed to tell someone that I went. I'm glad you told me, he said gently. Whatever you're feeling is valid, Rach. Complicated probably, but valid. Complicated. Yes, that was the word. Seeing her diminished, physically altered by the stroke had stirred something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps a recognition of her humanity, her fallibility. The consequences she was facing now weren't orchestrated by my father or grandfather. They were just the natural results of how she'd lived, the choices she'd made. I love you, I said to Eli. I'll be home soon. I started the car and pulled out of the hospital parking lot. As I drove, I found myself thinking about the cycles that defined families, how pain often bred more pain, how patterns repeated unless consciously broken. I'd spent years ensuring I wouldn't become like my mother. But there was another pattern I needed to be wary of, becoming so defined by past hurts that they dictated every future action. My phone rang as I was merging onto the highway. Unknown number again. I connected it to my car's Bluetooth. Dr. Winters speaking? Rachel? It's Frank again. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. What is it now, Frank? The nurse told me you came by. I wanted to thank you. I didn't do it for you, I know that. But it meant a lot to her. He paused. Look, there's something else. Something you should know. I'm listening. My tone was guarded. Your mother's been writing you letters. For years. Ever since you set us up in the condo. One a month at least. She never sent them. Knew you wouldn't want them. But she kept writing. What kind of letters? I asked, my throat suddenly tight. Apologies. Updates about our life. Mostly just ... thoughts. Things she wished she'd done differently. After the stroke, she asked me to get them from the condo. They're here in our hospital room. I said nothing, processing this information. I'm not asking you to read them, Frank continued. Just thought you should know they exist. She never expected forgiveness, Rachel. She just wanted you to know she recognized what she'd done. What we'd done. The highway stretched before me. Traffic light in the early evening. The doctors, I said after a long moment. What's their assessment for her recovery? Realistically, Frank sighed. Partial. She need extensive therapy. The stroke affected her language center pretty significantly. And there's weakness on her left side that may be permanent to some degree. And the insurance? What will it cover? Basic rehabilitation, 6 weeks maybe. Not the specialized therapies that would make a real difference. He hesitated. I've been looking into additional coverage, but with our financial situation ... single quotes, I knew what he wasn't saying. The modest income from the hardware store job. The controlled expenses of the condo I'd arranged. It was enough for them to live on, but not enough for extensive medical care. There's a rehabilitation center in Millfield, I said, surprising myself. Dr. Levinson's group. They specialize in stroke recovery, particularly language rehabilitation. We couldn't possibly afford. I know the director. I cut him off. I'll make a call. The silence on the other end was heavy. Why would you do that? Frank asked finally. After everything? I thought about the folder of clippings, about my mother's slurred but clear statement. So proud. Never said. Should've. I'm not doing it for you, Frank, I said, echoing my earlier words. And I'm not even sure I'm doing it for her. Maybe I'm doing it for myself. So I don't have to wonder if I could have done more. Whatever the reason. He said, his voice thick. Thank you. I ended the call and continued driving, my thoughts swirling. When I pulled into the driveway of the home I shared with Eli, I sat for a moment, gathering myself. The porch light was on, welcoming me home. Through the window, I could see Eli moving around the kitchen, probably starting dinner. Waiting for me, not knowing I was sitting in the driveway having an existential crisis about the definition of forgiveness. My phone buzzed with a text. Eli, are you okay? Saw you pull up. I smiled despite myself. Of course he was watching for me. Of course he knew I might need a moment. I picked up the folder of clippings my mother had kept and got out of the car. Whatever I decided about her rehabilitation, about the letters Frank mentioned, about all of it, those were decisions for tomorrow. Tonight was for home. For Eli. For the life I'd built while my mother had been collecting fragments of my existence from afar. As I walked toward the front door, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, that was too simple a word for something so complex. But clearer. More certain of the path forward, even if that path held curves I hadn't anticipated. Eli opened the door before I could reach for my keys. Hey, he said softly. Rough day? I showed him the folder. My mother kept these. Articles about the practice. About us. He took the folder, glanced inside, then looked at me with those steady eyes that had seen me through so much. Come inside, he said, taking my hand. Tell me everything. And I did. Everything about the hospital visit. About Frank's call. About the rehabilitation center in Millfield, and my conflicted feelings about helping the woman who had once thrown me away. Eli listened without judgment, without trying to guide my decision. When I finished, he simply asked, "What do you think you'll do?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't know yet, but I think ... I think I'm not going to let what she did to me determine what I do now. That gives her too much power still. He nodded, understanding what I meant, perhaps better than I did myself. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I thought about the concept of burden. The word my mother had used that Christmas day long ago. How it had shaped me, driven me to prove her wrong in every possible way. "You know what's strange?" I said to Eli in the darkness. "All these years I've been so determined not to be a burden to anyone. But maybe I've been carrying the heaviest burden of all. This anger, this need to prove her wrong." Eli's hand found mine under the covers. "And now? I think I'm ready to put it down, not for her, for me." The next morning, I called Dr. Levinson at the Millfield Rehabilitation Center. I explained the situation, leaving out the complicated history, focusing only on my mother's medical needs. As I'd hoped, my professional connection was enough to get her evaluated for their specialized program. "The fees are substantial, doctor," Levinson warned me. "Insurance rarely covers the full cost." "I understand," I said. "Send the information to my office. I'll review it." After ending the call, I sat at my desk, staring at the framed photo of my father and grandfather, the two men who had planned so meticulously to protect me, to give me power when I'd been powerless. I wondered what they would think of what I was considering now. Would they see it as weakness, as capitulation? Or would they recognize it as the ultimate expression of the strength they'd wanted me to have, the power to choose my own path, regardless of what had been done to me? "Dad," I said softly to the photograph, "I think this is what you really wanted for me. Not revenge. Freedom!" My office phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was the hospital. "Dr. Winters? This is Nurse Chun from Valley Medical. I'm calling about Margaret Sullivan, my mother, her married name that I rarely used." "Yes?" I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. "She's asking for you. She's had a difficult night, and she's quite agitated. The doctors have sedated her, but she keeps saying your name." I closed my eyes, center myself. "I'll be there in an hour." This wasn't how I'd expected this day to go. I had clients scheduled, paperwork to complete. Yet something in the nurse's voice suggested urgency beyond the medical. I rescheduled my appointments and drove to Valley Medical, my mind circling through the possible scenarios awaiting me. Was my mother worse? Had there been another stroke? Or was this an emotional crisis rather than a physical one? When I arrived at room 307, Frank was there, looking haggard. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for coming," he said, genuine relief in his voice. "She had some kind of episode last night. They're not sure if it was another small stroke or a panic attack. But she's been asking for you." I looked at my mother in the hospital bed. She appeared to be sleeping, though not peacefully. Her face was drawn, her breathing shallow. "What happened?" I asked. Frank ran a hand over his face. "She woke up disoriented, calling for you. Became increasingly agitated when the nurses couldn't understand what she wanted. They had to sedate her eventually." I moved to the bedside, noticing the restraints on my mother's wrists, a standard precaution for confused patients who might pull out IVs or feeding tubes. "Has she been evaluated by psychiatry?" I asked, professional mode engaged. "The consult is scheduled for this afternoon." Frank hesitated. I thought maybe seeing you might help, if you're willing." I sat in the chair beside the bed. "I'll stay until she wakes up." Frank nodded gratefully. "I need to go to work for a few hours." They've been understanding, but I can't keep missing shifts. After he left, I studied my mother's face in repose. The strong resemblance to myself that I'd always tried to ignore was more apparent now that stress and illness had stripped away her careful makeup, her styled hair. The bones of her face were mine, the set of her mouth. Genetics, binding us regardless of emotional distance. I pulled out my phone and checked emails, responded to texts from clients' parents, reviewed journal articles I'd flagged to read. Professional tasks to distract from the emotional complexity of sitting beside the sleeping form of the woman who had once called me a burden. An hour passed before she began to stir. First small movements, fingers twitching, head turning slightly on the pillow. Then her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they fell on me. "Rachel?" Her voice was weaker than the day before, the slurring more pronounced. "Real or dreaming?" "I'm real," I said, putting my phone away. The nurse called. "Said you were asking for me." Relief flooded her face. "Afraid ... wouldn't come. I'm here now. What happened last night?" She closed her eyes briefly. "Bad dream. You, in danger. Couldn't help. Couldn't speak. Her good hand pulled against the restraint. Frustrated, I understood immediately. A common experience for stroke patients, the terrifying gap between what they wanted to express and what they could actually communicate. Combined with the emotional content of her dream, it would have been devastating. Without thinking, I reached forward and unbuckled the restraint on her right wrist. Her hand came free and she flexed her fingers gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "The psychiatric consult is coming this afternoon," I told her. "They'll help with the anxiety." She shook her head slightly. "Not crazy, just ... scared. I know. It's standard procedure after episodes like you had." She looked at me directly, her eyes surprisingly clear. "You ... helping? Rehabilitation?" News traveled fast in hospitals. "I've made some inquiries. Dr. Levinson's group in Millfield. They specialize in cases like yours. Can't afford." Her face clouded. "Let me worry about that." I kept my tone neutral, professional. "Why help?" The directness of the question, despite her slurred speech, caught me off guard. I considered deflecting, changing the subject. But something about her vulnerability, the clinical setting, perhaps even my own professional training, pushed me toward honesty. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Maybe because I can. Maybe because withholding help would make me more like you were then, not more like who I want to be now." She flinched at the comparison but nodded slowly. "Fair." We sat in silence for several minutes. The hospital sounds continued around us, the beep of monitors, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the hallway, the distant ping of an elevator. "Letters," she said finally. "Frank told you?" "Yes. He mentioned them. Want you to have if ready." She struggled with the longer sentence. "No pressure." I thought about the folder of clippings I'd taken home, about the years of letters Frank had described. Monthly missives sent into a void, with no expectation of response. "I'll think about it," I said honestly. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this non-commitment. Then, with visible effort, she formed her next words carefully. "Proud of you, always." Even when ... couldn't show. Too much ... shame. I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. "Save your strength. You don't need to explain now." "Need to," she insisted. "Might not." "Another chance." Her good hand moved across the blanket toward mine, not quite touching but the intention clear. "Not asking ... forgiveness. Just want you to know I didn't take her hand, but I didn't move mine away either." Our fingers rested inches apart on the hospital blanket, a visual representation of where we stood, neither connected nor completely separated. "I know now," I said softly. She nodded, her eyelids growing heavy as the medication in her system reasserted itself. "Tired. Rest," I said, standing. "I'll check back tomorrow." As I gathered my things, her voice came again, faint but determined. "Rachel, you were never a burden. The lie ... haunts me. Every day." I paused at the door, not turning back. "Sleep now. We'll talk more later." In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, unexpectedly shaken. The simple acknowledgement that her words had been a lie, that they haunted her, landed differently than I'd anticipated. Not healing the wound, exactly, but naming it accurately, seeing it for what it was. As I walked to my car, I called Dr. Levinson again. "I'd like to proceed with the evaluation for Margaret Sullivan," I said when he answered. "And I'll be covering the costs not met by insurance." "That's quite generous," he remarked. "Family member?" I hesitated only briefly. "Yes, my mother." The admission felt strange on my tongue, not untrue, but unfamiliar after years of emotional and verbal distance. "We can schedule the initial evaluation for next week, if her current doctors clear her for transfer." "Thank you. Please send all the paperwork to my office." As I ended the call, I realized I'd made a decision I hadn't consciously arrived at. I was going to help my mother. Not forgive her, necessarily, but help her. There was a distinction there that mattered to me, though I couldn't yet articulate exactly what it was. When I arrived home that evening, Eli had dinner waiting. He took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. "Rough day?" he asked against my hair. "Complicated day," I corrected, leaning into his embrace. "I've decided to help with her rehabilitation. Financially, at least." He nodded, not surprised. You've been moving in that direction since you first visited her, have I? I pulled back to look at him. You're a healer, Rachel, it's who you are. Even when the person needing healing is the one who hurt you most. I considered his words as we sat down to dinner. I'm not sure it's that simple. It's not just about healing her, it's about ... I don't know. Not being defined by what she did anymore. That sounds like healing to me, Eli said gently. Just not hers. Yours. Later that night, as Eli slept beside me, I found myself thinking about the letters my mother had written. Monthly documentation of her regret, her observations of my life from a distance, her reckoning with her choices. I wondered what they contained, whether reading them would bring clarity or just reopen old wounds. I reached for my phone and composed a text to Frank. The letters. Bring them next time I visit. His response came quickly, despite the late hour. All of them? I hesitated, then typed, start with the first year. We'll see from there. Setting the phone aside, I turned to look at Eli's sleeping form. The man who loved me as I was, who supported my decisions without trying to make them for me. The future I was building that had nothing to do with the pain of my past. In 2 days, I would meet with my mother's doctors to discuss transfer to the rehabilitation facility. In a week, I would begin reading her letters, starting at the beginning of her decade of silence and regret. I didn't know where any of it would lead. Reconciliation seemed too neat a concept for something so messy, so layered with hurt and history. But I did know one thing with absolute certainty. The power was mine now. Not because my father and grandfather had arranged it through financial machinations, but because I had claimed it for myself. The power to choose connection or distance, help or withholding. On my terms, in my time. The frightened 15-year-old girl sitting on cold steps with her backpack, waiting for her grandfather to rescue her, had become a woman who could rescue herself. And maybe, in some small way, begin to rescue others too. Even perhaps the mother who had once cast her aside. As I stood in the hospital corridor, the weight of my decisions settled into place. I would help my mother recover, not out of forgiveness, but from a place of strength. The frightened 15-year-old girl had finally found her voice, her power. That evening, as Eli and I sat on our porch, the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. You know, I said quietly, Grandpa and Dad thought they were setting up the perfect revenge. But what they really gave me was freedom. Freedom to choose, Eli nodded, understanding. Exactly. The choice to break the cycle. To not let what she did determine what I do. I thought about the folder of newspaper clippings, the years of unread letters, and my mother in her hospital bed, diminished, yet finally honest. The truth wasn't that I needed her approval or even her remorse. The truth was that I no longer needed anything from her at all. My phone buzzed with a message from Frank confirming he'd bring the first year of letters on my next visit. I set it aside, focusing instead on the warmth of Eli's hand in mine and the future we were building together. My mother had called me a burden and cast me out, but through my grandfather's careful planning and my own resilience, I had found my way back, not to her, but to myself, to the woman I was meant to be. The journey wasn't about revenge or even reconciliation. It was about reclamation, of my power, my worth, my right to determine my own story. As night settled around us, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for 10 years. The cycle of pain had been broken. The letter had arrived. I finally, completely, was free.